There's no I in others. And it's just a mere pure awareness. I think you are familiar with this when you think of the story of Bahia, when the Buddha gives a brief teaching, ditte, dittamatang pavistati, and so on. And Bahia is said to have been liberated on the spot. And this is perception, or abhisamaya as perception par excellence, that we find in Theravada texts, and we find this teaching, this understanding developed in the Sarvastiva Abhidharma. So here it says, basically it's like this, the Chakshu Vijnana, he cognizes Nilam Vijanadi, no do Nilamiti. Can you follow? It cognizes the blue, but it doesn't know it is blue, Nilamiti. So when the mind comes to, however, the mental consciousness is in contrast, mental consciousness cognizes both the blue and the fact that it is blue. So when you come to understand that it is blue, you have the operation of inference, and you have the operation of sanjaya, using nama. And I'm speaking very, very briefly and quickly, but at least you can see the profundity of the development, of the inner working, psychological working of liberated insight. But here, of course, it's just a case of pratyaksha in the ordinary sense. That is, when we see something, when we see the eye sees something, the eye cannot cognize in the sense of conceptualizing it. It only sees the blue there as a color, eye. There's no reflection, no naming, no conceptualization. So, visual consciousness is a case of pratyaksha, very clearly, but certainly it's not a case of pratyaksha that is liberative. So from that basis, they develop a whole system of understanding the working of liberated insight known as abhisamaya. The term abhisamaya comes from abhi, sam, and e, which means abhi is direct. When you see the term abhi, often it connotes the sense of, for want of a better term, the sense of direct spiritual insight. Not conceptual, not via any logical conceptual medium. Sam is full completely, E is understanding. So it is, I think we can use the term direct realization. Right, so we see this profound development. This is later on used as the basis for the development, as I say, when you come to later on at the time of Dharmakirti, you know that, and Dharmottara, and they have defined pratyaksha, that is direct perception, as a perception that is devoid of kalpana, devoid of any conceptualization. But here you see that in this stage of development in the Svasivada, I think they are more dramatic. In a sense, they are more truthful because they resist philosophical systematization, and they admit an element of understanding also involved in it. This is the point I want to make. But this element of intellectual understanding, necessary as it is not conceptual proliferation. It's not prapancha. It doesn't go to that extent. But you do have to have an element of understanding. Otherwise, how do you know what are the truths? Dukkha, samudaya, and so on. Each truth has to be analyzed and dismissed upon. So when Buddhism speaks of liberation, liberated insight, everybody agrees that it is liberated insight into the four truths. So how is the truth of dukkha distinguished from the truth of samudaya and so on? So suddenly it requires an element of understanding. But their understanding cannot be to the extent of conceptual proliferation. This is the profound finding of their system. I think I will go a bit fast now. I think time is running out. I now next introduce to you, I think you can see, it's not projected, Abhisamaya, the Indian play of, in this experience of Abhisamaya, that is direct realization of the Noble Truths. You see how it's united with the Theravada system. Everything is centered around the Four Noble Truths. So here you see a display of what I call Shanti and Jnana. And the point is that to gain, for instance, direct realization to the truth of, first of all, dukkha, the first dukkha, you need to correspondingly abandon, that is the kata, abandon is a technical term, certain amount of disturbances your mind called clashes, defilements. And that cutting takes place in the first moment called Shanti, followed by the next moment called Jnana. The second moment, the succeeding moment, in which you gain the insight now of that truth. So it goes on like this, from one truth to another, from the truths pertaining to the karma dhatu to the truths pertaining to the two higher dhatu. So I don't have time to go through the whole thing for you, but it's all in the text. So this is what I speak of as an interplay of Shanti and Jnana. So first, one moment of Shanti followed by one moment of Jnana. So what does it mean? It means that prior to the actual insight, let's say of dukkha, you must come to a stage where your mind is totally receptive to that fact. And that's called Shanti. Shanti here doesn't mean something like patient endurance, any in that negative sense, but it means receptivity. You are open to that. You are gladly open to that fact. You are ready to accept the fact, although it's not jnana as such, but it's jnana to be. This is called Shanti. So they work out the dynamic, right? Using these two concepts. First Shanti and then Jnana. And in this way, they arrive at a total of 16 thought moments. Because for each truth, you have one Shanti, one Jnana, then you have four truths pertaining to the Kama Dhatu, and then you have the fourth truth pertaining to the higher Dhatus. Altogether, you have 16 movements. I have listed out in the text itself. So they go to that extent to analyze the working, the psychological working of the process of direct realization, the process of liberation. And what is to be noted also is that since it involved a moment of Shanti before a moment of Jnana, Shanti, Jnana, Shanti, Jnana, Shanti represents the aspect of intellectual understanding. But as I say, intellect is a very refined state of understanding that is devoid of what is called abhiniropana vikalpa. That is, vikalpa that is characterized by judgment, by intellectual speculations. But nonetheless, you have this aspect. And as I said, this is quite different from what we see later on when the Buddhist logicians in the 7th century onwards, they come to systematize the whole concept of pratyaksha and say that in a pratyaksha experience, the moment when you say it is this, you go beyond direct perception. You come to the domain of inference. So I hope to kind of introduce this profound development in the Sarvasya Abhidharma, and all these materials are before the logical development of the later time. The opponent questioned the Sarvastivada in the concept of two types of knowledges of wisdom. One is called Dharma Jnana, the other is called Anvaya Jnana. I think you have come across this term. In Pali we have also. Usually, Anvaya Jnana is translated as inference. You can see, I believe you have a very well-known book on Buddhist philosophy by one of our friends, one of our scholars. And the term used is inference knowledge. Let me say that from the Sarvastivada perspective, it is not correct. It's not inference. It is intellectual understanding, all right, but an understanding that arises in conformity to the insight of direct realization of Abhisamaya. So it is also of the nature of Abhisamaya. And Sanghabhata argues about that. So I translate Anvaya Jnana not as inference knowledge, but as subsequent knowledge, because it's subsequent to the actual realization of truth pertaining to the Kama Dhatu. That is called Dharma Jnana. When they come to, you have to go, in the meditation, you have to move on to a higher stage, that is, your insight pertaining to suffering, to dukkha, and to impermanence, and so on, right, at a too higher level. That knowledge pertaining to the higher spheres are called Anvaya, and this Sanghabhata argues should not be taken as logical inferential, but it should be taken as a type of insight that shares the same nature as direct realization. So let me jump to the last section. How do we understand their findings relating to the inner dynamics, psychological happenings in the process of liberated insight? So I propose a notion called layered texturization as an analytical framework for understanding the psychology of direct realization. This approach recognizes that Pradaksha in the Sarvastivada philosophy integrates multiple dimensions and simultaneity. These are the different dimensions. First, it entails immediacy. In direct realization, the insight is not mediated. The insight is direct. You know the object truly as it is. And even in Pali, we are familiar with the term yatha Buddha jnana. So immediacy is one. And then the structure, that is interesting. There is the analytical discernment necessary for street insight from what I described. To highlight this, yeah? And then there must also be at the same time non-conceptuality, freedom from conceptual proliferation in the higher samahita states. And of course, the realization in this sense can only take place in a meditative state. That, I hope, is helpful for those who are practicing meditation and vipassana. Why do you do that? Because you want to gain insight, and you know that liberation must be within the context of meditative insight. And also, fourthly, it entails the aspect of discrimination, the capacity to accurately distinguish dharmas. This is dukkha, this is anitya, nairatmya, shunyata. But it requires an element, as I say, of discrimination. These dimensions are complementary, not opposed. direct perception can be both immediate and structured, non-conceptual and discriminative. And this explains why the Buddhist traditions preserve multiple valid approaches to direct realization. We know that in Sarvastivada, in Theravada, in the Sautrandhikas, and so on, in the Yogacharas, there are different approaches. Because different traditions emphasize different dimensions of the same complex psychological phenomenon. There will be a part that is a little bit more involved. The question is whether in the realization, if it is a pratyaksha, then it must be an insight of the thing in itself. So in other words, it must be an insight into what is called the swalakshana. But on the other hand, now they say, the Sarvasya Abhidharma says that understanding swalakshana is not enough. That's a very interesting point. In what sense it's not enough? Because a person cannot be fully detached from the phenomena, from the clashes, unless he also directly perceives the universal characteristics. So that is to say, not only this particular clasher, this particular object, is worthless, is unsatisfactory, dukkha, and so on, but the universal fact that all conditioned objects are unsatisfactory, all are devoid of Atma, and so on. So this comes to the level of the aspect of what is called Samanya Lakshana. So then it states that without insight into Samaya Lakshana, Abhisamaya Lakshana, there cannot be liberation. That's interesting. So you have to have two. So are these two in conflict? How can you have Swalakshana and Samalakshana insight at the same time? That's an extremely interesting point. Please read my explanations for the details. But in brief, what they have found, what they have worked out is that there is, as I say, a layered texturization in the experience. You at once perceive universal characteristics, and at the same time, you also see the specific characteristic of the object being preserved. And so in this way, they resolves, or they at least they attempt to resolve the tension between the two. So this is what I describe as a continuous process from understanding to realization. Our investigation into the Sarvasivada Abhidharma suggests that the relationship between intellectual understanding and direct realization is best understood as a continuous accumulative process. In this process, accumulative process, you don't deny the role of intellectual understanding. So that gives hope, that gives meaning to those who are intellectually inclined. You are engaged in Buddhist scholarship. Are you neglecting meditative insight? Now, from what I've described, the implication is that no, it need not be a conflict in this way. That in fact, it should be a continuous process of contribution. Accumulatively, you gain understanding, and that understanding leads you to more and more refined understanding, and then also, accordingly, more and more refined spiritual experience. And finally, then in the actual Abhisamaya experience, that is in the process of direct realization, you come to insight that totally transcends intellectual understanding. But nonetheless, on the way, you need this understanding to help you step by step, and these are not to be rejected as opposition. This continuity is evident in the Sarvastivada understanding of Abhisamaya. As one progresses through the preparatory stage of the path, conceptual understanding of the Fourth Truth becomes increasingly refined until you reach the level, as I say, of Shanti, as I described, and then that is followed by the moment of jhana. So at this stage, even the refined investigation ceases entirely, yet it directly emerges from the preceding Shanti. After Abhisamaya, conceptual understanding is transformed by the realization that preceded it. I think this has implications for contemporary Buddhist scholarship and practice, as I described to you, and I shall also skip this section because I think I'm running over time. Let me just then state the conclusion. Our exploration of the psychology of, I call it psychology, I think it's quite justifiably, of Pratyaksha, Abhisamaya, and Vipassana from the Sarvastivada perspective reveals the sophisticated understanding of direct realization in Buddhist tradition. The relationship between Shanti as refined investigation and Dhyana as decisive knowledge that follows, the collaboration of mindfulness and wisdom in direct perception, the progressive dismantling of self-conception through the four foundations of mindfulness, I've skipped that part, and the inseparability of samatha and vipassana, I have emphasized that. All these principles illuminate the inner working of liberative insight, hence psychology. This perspective offers valuable guidance for contemporary Buddhist scholarship in practice. It reminds us that intellectual understanding and direct realization need not be opposed. I have said several times that they can form a continuous process leading toward the final, direct, liberative realization of reality truly as it is. Thank you for your kind attention.
Thank you very much, Most Venerable Professor, for your valuable insights. Now, we turn into a significant moment, the launch of the conference proceedings. The proceedings manual will be officially handed over by the Senior Professor, Vasanta Priyadarshana, to the Director of PGIPBS.
We now move to the launch of a glossary of the Buddhist technical terms, Pali, Sanskrit, Chinese, Tibetan, authored by Senior Professor Chair, Venerable Madhavache Dhammajoti Thero. Despite his demanding administrative role, Venerable Professor has continued to enrich the academic field through his significant work. We now invite him to symbolically hand over the first copies to Venerable Senior Professor Kotapitiya Rahula Thero, Emeritus Professor Most Venerable K.L. Dhammajoti Thero. Let us offer our congratulations on this meaningful contribution. to honor and recognize distinguished contribution, we now invite Senior Professor Chair Venerable Madhavachia Dhammajoti Thero to present the plaque of appreciations.
Emeritus Professor, Most Venerable K.L. Dhammajoti Thero, Director of Buddha Dhamma Center, Hong Kong. Honorable Mr. Hanif Yusuf, Governor of Western Province. Venerable Senior Professor Kotapitiye Rahula Anunayaka Thero, Kotte Chapter of Kalyani Dharma Mahasangha Sabha. Mr. G. Pradeep Saputantri, Secretary to the Prime Minister. Honorable Mr. Hanif Yusuf, Governor of the Western Province. Mr. KMGS Nalaka Kaluwewa, Secretary to the Ministry of Education and Higher Education. Honorable David Pinn, High Commissioner, New Zealand. Ms. Prangdeep, Representative Thai Ambassador. Madam G. Lily, Consular, Chinese Embassy. Professor Ankuran Datta, Director, Swami Vivekananda Cultural Center, High Commission of India. Mr. Sandeep Chowdhury, First Secretary to Indian High Commission. Senior Professor Chair, Madam Nilanthi Renuka De Silva, Vice Chancellor, University of Kelaniya. Ms. Prangtip Kangasai, Representative Thai Embassy. Mr. K. Dharmatilaka, Registrar, University of Kelaniya. Emeritus former Professor Tilak Karyavasam. Emeritus former Professor Y. Karunadasa. Emeritus Professor Asanga Tilakaratna. Dr. D. Senadira. Dr. M. Empiris. Most Venerable Shi Song Yang. Mr. Deepak Das, Managing Director, Indian Oil Company. Most Venerable Shi Mengjing. Most Venerable Shi Rauri. Most Venerable Bhikkhuni Dr. Shanjushi. Dr. Dulan Hettiarachi. Miss Manel Vitanavasam. Miss LPK Vinita Matupermi. Mr. NL Chandrasena. Mr. DMJ Bandara. Miss MN Piris. Mrs. AHLS Vanikasuriya. Last but not the least, Mr. Veerasena Pereira. Mr. P.P. Abesinghe. Mr. P.P. Abesekara.
As our morning session draws to a close, may I kindly invite all the guests and participants to join us in front of a group photograph to commemorate this historic day. You are warmly invited to join us and enjoy the refreshment prepared by Your Honor after the group photographs in the second floor. Thank you.